Let's solve question 17 now. So what do we have here? Assume that there are two periods and the company can fire a worker after the first period and hire a new worker for period 2. So the company chooses at the start of period 1 a worker of type B. Is this true or false? Well, let's see. Now, because we have two periods, we have to keep in mind that our expected probabilities, our expected profits, are gonna change. So let's start doing it for type worker A, and then we'll see how that applies to the next one as well, to worker B. So the expected profit, if we hire a type A worker, would be the following. We know that there's a 2/3 probability, so there's a 2/3 probability that the worker delivers us 120 euros per period. So in other words, for two periods, we would have the following. We would have a probability of 2/3 that we are getting 120 in the first period plus 120 in the second period. Now let's see what happens in the second period, right? Not in the second period, but I mean with the second probability, with the remaining probability. 1/3, well, we would have a loss, right? We would have a loss of 60 euros. But what we know is that if the worker produces a loss, then we would hire him, because we can fire a worker after the first period. In other words, if we have a loss of 60 euros in the first period, we're not going to have a loss in the second period again, because we're going to fire the worker and hire a new one. And if we hire a new worker, we know that the expected profit of worker A for one period, in this case that would be the second period, is equal to 60 euros. So we would get a profit of 60 because we would hire a new worker, and as a result will be equal to 160 as an expected profit. Now, before going on, let's just highlight here a bit what's happening, because this really matters and it's not very intuitive. What matters is mainly this term, because this is more difficult. Over here we have the probability of having a profitable worker. This is just the probability of having positive profit. But what we have over here is that we're dealing with uncertainty, and we are having a loss in the first period. We know that we're having a loss in the first period, so loss in period 1. And if we have a loss in period 1, that it means we're not going to have a loss in the second period again. We fire the worker, then hire new worker, so new A worker, and the A worker has an expected profit per period of 60 euros. We calculated that in the previous video. And that period, that single period, will be the second period in this case, because we hire him for the second period. So hire new A in period 2, and that would give us a profit of 60 again. That's where the positive 60 is coming in. And as a result, we just work out the math and get 160 euros in expectation from type A worker. Hope this makes sense. Now let's do the same method for the worker B. We will calculate the expected profit of worker B over here below. So the expected profit of worker B would be the following. We would have a probability of 1/2. So a probability of 1/2 that the worker delivers us 300 euros worth of profit. So in two periods we would have the following: probability 1/2 that we get 300 euros in the first period plus 300 euros in the second period. Now with the remaining probability, so plus 1/2, the remaining probability, we would have a loss from the worker, right? Because there's the remaining probability that we have a loss of 300 euros with a probability of 1/2. Now, what would happen in that case? Well, if we have a loss from the type B worker, so we would have over here minus 300 euros as a loss, then we know that we would fire the type B worker and we would hire a type A worker. Why would we hire a type A worker? Because we saw in the previous question, when we choose to hire a worker for one period only, we would go for type A because he's more profitable. And in this case, we are left only with the second period to decide. So we would decide for the type A worker. Hope this makes sense. We're gonna write the highlights over here and it's gonna make more sense. Now what's the math over here? If we work this out, it's gonna be equal to 180. This is gonna be equal to 180. Okay, let's write the highlights. Over here there's a probability that the worker is profitable. So there's a probability of positive profit, and over here what we have is the following. We have a probability of having a loss in the first period, so loss in period 1. What happens then? we fire worker B, and then we decide to hire worker A in second period because we saw he is more profitable. And because we hire worker A in second period, we expect from him a profit of 60. Therefore, that's why we would have this gain of 60 in the second period. Hope this makes sense. Now, if we compare this, let me just zoom out to get the highlight of everything. If we compare these two, what we can see is that the expected profit of worker B under this scenario is greater than the expected profit of worker A, because 180 is greater than 160. In other words, type B is more profitable, so we would hire the worker B. And if we have a look at the answer key, they tell us that we would hire worker B. That's true, and we are done.